Welcome to Combos from the Couch by LifeStance Health, where leading mental health professionals help guide you on your journey to a healthier, more fulfilling life. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Combos from the Couch. I'm Nicolette Lianza, and joining me today is Kendrick Coates, and he'll be sharing his own personal journey as a therapist and an athlete as we tackle the importance of athlete mental health. So great to have you on, Kendrick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on today.
So let's jump in. Please share with us your story and what drew you to working with athletes.
Yeah. I didn't have a linear path to becoming a therapist for athletes. It was about 2017, 16, 17 when I was coaching athletes, and I've been in the coaching and training space with athletes for about a decade. And I remember an athlete coming to one of our sessions, and I had spent so much time around athletes. I generally knew what kind of energy they had coming to sessions, what their mood was. And this one athlete, her mood was different. And so I was just checking with her and I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I could tell that something was bothering her. Long story short, she started breaking down and we were in the conversation. We got to the end of it and she's like, "You know what? You'd make a good therapist one day." I did not take that to heart. I was just like, "Yeah, I don't really know much about mental health other than going to therapy myself, but why would I wanna be a therapist?" Fast forward to now, it's been such an incredible journey because I was once an athlete who did struggle with my own mental health, anxiety, depression, and I didn't have anybody to talk to. I was isolated. I didn't wanna say anything to my teammates because I felt like if I said anything to them, I would look like a wimp. I didn't wanna say anything to parents because I wasn't sure if I I didn't know if they'd be able to handle some of the things that was going on in my life, and I didn't wanna say anything to any of my coaches because I knew that if I said anything to my coaches that maybe my playing time would get cut, and so when I'm in this space working with athletes, I'm able to pull from my coaching experience and my playing experience, and I'm blending it in with my clinical experience. So I see couples in athletes, and then I'm also a mental health advisor, athlete mental health advisor for the Illinois High School Association, and that's
Oh,
been an
wow.
incredible journey, just being able to connect with athletic directors, athletic trainers, coaches, etc., and educating them on the importance of athlete mental health.
Oh, wow, Kendrick, that's really amazing right there.
Yeah.
Because with that, you're trying to help it get started at a younger age, hitting those high schoolers, and even probably even younger than that, too. So
Yeah,
important. Appreciate all the good work you do, for
absolutely.
sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about mental health in sports that you encountered?
This one might be surprising to some people, but one of the biggest things is that sometimes we get into this mindset of thinking that sports will handle all mental health issues for athletes. I don't think that's the case because if we think about this, a lot of athletes have these pressures, whether the pressures are coming from parents, whether the pressures are coming from coaches. And then we have this new age of NIL. And I think actually in Ohio, I want to say it's either Ohio or Michigan, they had just passed some law with high school athletes being able to take advantage of some of the NIL, which brings in a
Yeah.
whole other list of
For those who
pressures.
might not know what NIL is, can you please
Yeah,
clarify for
yeah.
those who might not know?
Name, image, and likeness, so athletes are now able to make money off of their
Yep.
existence, the things that they're involved in, and so when we think about, okay, some of the things I hear is, "My son or daughter is having behavioral issues, we should get them involved in a sport," or,
Mhm.
the student is struggling with their schoolwork, let's get them involved in a sport," or the list goes on, but the thing is, that doesn't solve the issue. Sometimes that
Right,
can be an immediate, maybe coping strategy
right,
for or masking. But
right.
from my own experiences, I was involved in sports and I struggled. I had the community around me. I had athletes that I was friends with. But then the other part of this that I want to drive home is there was a research article, and I wanna say this was from the British Journal of Medicine. They did a 20-year study on suicide with athletes, and what they found was that athletes from the time of 2012 to 2022, suicide had doubled and student
Whoa.
athletes. And so when we think about we'll just put our athletes in the sport and it'll take care of the mental health, that is not always the case. And so I encourage coaches and parents to look deeper into what is the root cause of some of the things that are coming up for these athletes. Because if we continue to just mask, I always bring up the question, if we don't give student athletes the resources and tools that they need to help with their mental health at an early age, how are these things going to impact them for the rest of their life?
I agree 100%. So to tag on to that, how do you approach conversations with athletes who may be hesitant to seek help due to stigma?
Good question. I bring in my own story. So one of the things that I talk about when I'm out talking to athletes or teams is I remember when I was in high school being the standout athlete and everyone thought I had it put together. But the story of when you have football games, usually you go out, warm up, come back in the locker room, and the coach is up at the whiteboard drawing out plays and the scripts for the first 5 or 10 plays. I remember every single time I would doze off or fall asleep in those meetings. And back when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I was like, oh, maybe I didn't get enough sleep. That wasn't necessarily the case. I had so much anxiety in my body that it
Uh,
was so overwhelming that my brain started to shut down and go into protection mode. So those are the stories that I tell athletes, and they're like, "Oh, wow, I've had similar experiences." I bring in my injury history. I was injured almost every year, even in college when I played. Every single year I was injured and I could never figure it out. Coaches were like, "Oh, we've got to lift more. We got to do these things," but it didn't help. And some of this was from the anxiety. The
mhm,
other thing that I like to do when I'm out talking to coaches is how are we creating an open environment where athletes feel comfortable enough to begin to have conversations within their team and with coaches. The same thing with parents. How are we actually opening up spaces to where athletes can actually express, "Hey, I'm not feeling right today. I'm feeling a little burnt out. I don't know if I want to play this sport anymore." And if we aren't opening up these spaces where athletes feel heard, seen, and
mhm.
appreciated, but more importantly, safe, then we're missing a key opportunity to give them the resources that they need. Because again, if athletes don't feel like they are heard or safe
Right,
enough, then they
right.
just suppress all of those things. And then it manifests in other things such as
Yes.
chronic illness, headaches. I've seen those
Mhm.
before, generalized anxiety disorder, depression, and the
Right.
list goes on and on.
I love that you use that term safe. I think for a lot of athletes, that fear of, oh, I won't play or I'll be benched if I dare say that I'm struggling. And so that key of just feeling safe to be able to speak up. I really appreciate that you said that for sure.
The other thing that I'll add to that, because safe in the nervous system for me, I do a lot of nervous system work with athletes, and sometimes they're like, nervous system work, what is that? And our nervous system is in tune with so much more than we sometimes give it credit for. So, what I mean by nervous system, the prime example that I use with athletes is, hey, if you were at the free throw line to shoot 2 free throws to either tie the game or win it, could you go up there and be calm, collected, and make those shots? Or would you be nervous? And a lot of athletes I talk to, they're like, "I'd be nervous, I'd be shaken." That's a nervous system response of, "Okay, if I miss this, will I be letting my parents down? Will I be letting my coaches
Mhm.
down? Will I look like a failure in the course of this competition?" So, a lot of things I do is to try to make the nervous system feel safe, so it doesn't feel like, "Okay, if this
Ah,
athlete does miss this shot, that doesn't mean that they're a failure. It doesn't mean that
I
maybe their
see.
parents are disappointed." So, I always come back to safety when I'm working with athletes.
So if that's interesting, thank you for the clarification because I was looking at it that athletes would feel safe to be able to share, but what you're describing is that they're feeling safe within themselves.
Yeah, yeah, and if the adults in those situations are actually going to really take what they're saying into consideration instead of brushing it off, and I
Mhm.
see that so often with a lot of athletes, specifically my football athletes. Their experiences are sometimes pushed to the side because and I'm a former football player. A lot of it is, well, you just suck it up, rub some dirt on it, and just get back out there and play. And so
Mhm.
we sometimes don't feel like we have the space to actually bring something to a coach that is a little bit more vulnerable for us. So it goes
Mm.
both ways. Is the athlete's nervous system and their whole existence safe enough to go to this coach? And is this coach creating a environment of safety so that athletes can share the things that are coming up for them?
Let's shift gears, talk a little bit about performance anxiety. So what techniques do you find most effective when helping athletes manage that?
A lot of it is I come back to the nervous system work and somatic work. And so when I have athletes come into my office who are struggling with anxiety, I like to bring it to their body. What are they experiencing in their body? So an example is I'll walk an athlete through, okay, can you actually find where the tightness is in your body? Okay,
Mm.
once they find that tightness, can you explain it to me? Is there a specific shape? Is there a color? And once we do that, is there a feeling? And that's where there's a little bit of a block when I bring up, is there a feeling or an emotion with it? And so I bring in, I'm sure all the clinicians out there have heard of the feelings wheel. So I'll bring that in. And
Mm.
I have the athletes identify what is a specific emotion or feeling that is tied to that tension in your body. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's sadness, etc. And so with that, it's a really good tool for them to have more self-awareness because I think
Mhm.
athletes, they do get a lot of the cognitive things from the sport. So we've got to cognitively be aware of what play are we running? What position on the field or court am I supposed to be in? They're they're prime candidates for more of the somatic nervous system work because they have to be in their body. They
Yeah,
have to understand what their bodies are
makes
doing,
sense.
and so I've had an athlete before come to session struggling with some of these things. We go through this whole somatic experiencing and visualization to really bring in what they're experiencing. They'll go out, do it in a game when tension is high or if they made a mistake, and then they'll come back to session and they say, "Wow, like some of the breath work stuff that we did, some of the somatic work that we did, I'm aware of when the anxiety goes up, but the most important thing is I'm aware and I know what to do with the anxiety." And I think a lot of
Mm.
younger athletes, when anxiety does come to them, it's like, holy crap, this is uncomfortable and I don't know what to do with it.
Right,
And I think it's
right.
so important to give these athletes the tools and resources because this isn't just about sports. This is about life. And more times than not, especially with my older athletes who have now retired from their sport, they don't know how to identify some of these things in their body. They don't
Right.
know how to, what do I do with all this anxiety? And unfortunately, a lot of athletes go into coping strategies that aren't healthy, so smoking, drinking,
Yeah.
etc. And my whole goal when I'm working with athletes, whether it's performance anxiety or something else, is how do we get them prepared for life because sports are going to end at some point or
Right.
another.
Which at that point, then you're also helping them prepare for life, that identity after their sport. Very key
Absolutely.
there. What advice would you give to coaches or teammates who want to support an athlete struggling with their mental health?
So I go back to what I mentioned earlier is what are we doing to create an environment and safe space for them to be able to talk about these things? When I'm going out and talking to educating coaches or teams, I bring these things up. What are we doing? So what are the things that we're saying when an athlete says, "Hey, I feel a little bit depressed." How are we responding to them? When an athlete says, "Hey, coach, I'm really overwhelmed by a lot of this anxiety, and some of it's not even coming from my sport, some of it's coming from what's going on at home."
Right.
How is the coach actually responding to it? And so when I'm around coaches, I incorporate, and that's the beautiful thing about I think being a marriage and family therapist associate is I know how to work with couples and I know how to model behave. What is the appropriate
Mm.
language to use in situations to make things feel safe? So we're giving those coaches tools and resources so they don't feel like they're in a position where they're ill-equipped to handle some of the things that athletes are bringing them. The other piece of this is when I'm talking to athletes is what do we do when your teammate says, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore."
Mhm.
Who are the athletes going to? Because sometimes athletes can't address some of these issues themselves. Some of
Right.
it does come from us, us adults that are in these positions that are able to do these things. And this is one of the big reasons why I started my podcast, Coats in Conversation, which looks at the intersection of athletics and mental health, because I want it to be another resource that athletes and coaches can go to and hear other stories of how other athletes or coaches have navigated these things. Because at the end of the day, I think from a performance standpoint, athletes have a lot of what they need. But when it comes to self regulation, managing anxiety,
Mhm.
managing depression, I think we could do a little bit better job there so that athletes are set up for their adulthood once they're out of their sport.
I agree. Thank you. Any other insights you'd like to share?
I wanna say I just bring it back to my experiences as a athlete. They were fun. I can't deny that, but there were times where it was also dark. And I think where it got dark was when I left my sport. It
Mm.
no longer could use the identity of, "Hey, I'm the football player, so everybody should come and talk to me. I'm the football player, so I should have all of these privileges." Once all of that went away, I didn't know who I was as a person. And so it took a lot of therapy and self exploration for me to figure out this is who I am as a person and I'm comfortable in my skin now. What I would say to athletes out there, coaches out there, or parents that are listening to this, how do you want to set your young student athlete up for life once sport ends? And this is one of the biggest things that I see once athletes are done. It can be
Yeah.
extremely dangerous. I refer back to that research study that I mentioned earlier with
Mhm.
suicide doubling since 2012. Now, if we take that into consideration, this is scary because
Yeah.
I personally think that this is going to increase because we have name, image, and likeness. Sports has become a business, even at the high
Yeah.
school level with
Right.
you, travel league ball, all of these things. And so I just really encourage athletes, coaches, and parents to really take into consideration how athlete mental health not only impacts performance, but it actually impacts your life.
Kendrick, my gosh, I see your passion for the athletes, for the couples you work with, as well as you seem to walk the walk with your life. And I appreciate you yourself being an athlete and knowing what that's like, and just using your skills and your experience to work with your clients. I just really appreciate everything you shared today. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate you having me on.
I'd also like to thank the team behind the podcast, Jason Clayton and Juliana Whitten. Thank you for listening to Congress from the Couch. Take care, everyone.